All right, welcome everybody. On behalf, oh, thank you. Wow, I wasn't expecting all that. I thought I just muted that. Apparently I can't.
You got this.
Let's just figure out. There we go. Okay. So on behalf of, when I lost my, there we go. Y'all know Cole Hall is finicky. Let's see if it pops back up. There we go. Okay. So on behalf of the graduate and professional dream advocates, the Multicultural Resource Center, and last but not least, the LGBT Resource Center, we welcome you to a very special event, Migration is Beautiful, featuring artist and activist Favianna Rodriguez. As we get started this afternoon, I want to let you know that we are live streaming via a feed that's internal to UCSF. It's probably accessible externally. So please note that if you have friends and classmates that weren't able to be with us today, that this event will be recorded and you can share the presentation with them that they can view later. In addition, we will be tweeting and trending on Twitter, so please use the hashtags Migration is Beautiful to capture any quotes and insights that you may have. I want to start off by sharing a little bit more about our program here at UCSF, Undocumented Student Support Services. This is actually a virtual resource center that we've created to kind of capture and be in support of our undocumented students at UCSF, but also be a visible resource to prospective students and to staff and faculty allies. So you can visit the website to gather updates as they come out. There's a lot of information trending right now, and we're doing our best to make sure that we capture that information and share that adequately with our community. Most recently, we released a newsletter, and how many people got that newsletter on Friday? Lots of hands. So if you found that to be helpful, forward it on out, because at UCSF, y'all know that we can't, the only person who can send an email to everybody is the chancellor. So that's kind of a protected form of communication. So in order to share as much information as we can with our community members, we ask that you help in distributing and sharing that. So next, I just want to welcome a very special guest, Rachel Ray, who is our managing attorney of UC Undocumented Legal Services Center at UC Davis, and she's going to be sharing a little bit about our resources, and then we will bring up our keynote speaker. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I just want to thank Favianna for sharing the space with me so I can give out some information about our services. So really quickly, we provide free immigration legal services to all UC students and their immediate family members, and we consider immediate family members to be parents, children, siblings, and spouses or future spouses. So that encompasses a lot of people who you might not consider to be part of the undocumented community. So please, please, please spread the word about our services. It's, as Lamisha reflected, it's really hard to get word out about our services here on the UCSF campus. I'm the dedicated UCSF attorney. I also manage 4 of the UC campuses. The only UC campus that we don't serve is UC Berkeley. They have their own immigration legal services. So even if you have a friend, a family member who's at another UC, they can benefit from our services, and they can feel free to contact me, and I can direct them to the correct person. Our website is up here. To schedule an appointment, you can email our dedicated UCSF email that goes directly to me. I don't know how to change the slide. Sorry. Okay, these are just some references, some resources for you. I'm happy to provide resources as well, and I'm in touch with Lamisha, so she should be receiving resources from me. Again, there's my name, my title, and the UCSF contact. I have some information next to Favianna's amazing art table. One thing you can do that would be super helpful if you're an ally is to take some of these flyers. They're up there. If we run out, you can come contact me and put them wherever you can flyer. I can't flyer everywhere on campus, but it's really hard for us to get information out about our services. So I have flyers, I have smaller handouts, and I also have some Know Your Rights information from the ACLU on our table. So thank you, Favianna. You all are lucky to be here. I'm glad you showed up. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. My name is Quinn Jaramillo, and I serve as the director of the LGBT Resource Center here on campus. And before I introduce our fabulous guest speaker, may I just say that I am just so happy to see so many beautiful faces here to stand in solidarity and power. We're living through so many critical times, and I'm just so happy to see many of our community members coming together to show support and to learn more about what we can do together as a community. So I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our guest today. Favianna Rodriguez is a transnational interdisciplinary artist and cultural organizer. Her art and collaborative projects deal with migration, global politics, economic injustice, patriarchy, and interdependence. Favianna lectures globally on the power of art, cultural organizing, and technology to inspire social change, and leads art workshops at schools around the country. Favianna's mission is to create profound and lasting social change in the world. Through her bold and provocative art, she has already touched the hearts and minds of millions. In addition to her fine arts and community work, Favianna partners with social movement groups around the world to create art that's visionary, inspirational, radical, and most importantly, transformational. When Favianna is not making art, she's directing Culture Strike, a national arts organization that engages artists, writers, and performers in immigrant rights. In 2009, she co-founded Presente.org, a national online organization network dedicated to political empowerment of Latino, Latina, Latinx communities. Please help me welcome Favianna Rodriguez.
Hi everyone, let me just make sure this is good. Great, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I was born and raised in Oakland, and I was a UC Berkeley student for about 3 years before I dropped out of college and just became an artist. And my father was recently treated here at UCSF last year. He passed away in June. He passed away from prostate cancer, but he got a lot of his services here at UCSF, so I'm really familiar with this campus. So my goal today is really to talk about the role of culture in creating policy and also in creating new imaginaries and challenging bias. And I also am hoping that you walk out of here with a real deep understanding of really how we got here, how we got to this political state that we're in. And what are some overall strategies that we can use in our work, in our relationships with people to challenge what is now a global anti-immigrant movement. So I'll start a bit with my history. My parents are migrants. My father, who just passed away, Afro-Peruvian man from Peru. My mom is also from Peru. They migrated here and I was born in Oakland. And growing up here in California, I think what people forget is that California has gone through what our country is going through now. California did it, and they totally messed up, and now they're repairing everything that they messed up. So in the 90s, California was actually the first state to introduce state-based anti-immigrant legislation, right? Pete Wilson, when he created Proposition 187, which he created because in the 90s, in 1990, after the census came out, they realized, oh, there's this rapidly growing group of people called Latinos, and their growth is just kind of scaring us. So we are going to begin to create policies that criminalize them. And the people whose brainchild Proposition 187 were white nativists, right? Like people like the John Tanton Network, people who really understood how to create cultural narratives. So let's talk about the 90s for a sec. 1994, it was such a critical year, right? I was 16 at the time. Clinton passed NAFTA in '94, and his rhetoric was that there would be no borders for capital, right? That capital would freely flow, and yet That same year, he began construction at the U.S.-Mexico border, the militarized border. Before that, it was a fence. And so here, as a young person, I was observing that we had this narrative that said that things could move, but it was really about white capital moving, because clearly workers have to also move. When capital flows, workers follows. That is a known economic fact. So the fact that we began to build the border, which is now a heavily militarized border, you know, when we talk about this concept of the wall, build the wall is very, very solid. I mean, you can't build anymore. It's this metaphor, and I really want to stress the importance of symbolism and metaphors in the American imaginary. It doesn't have to be real. It is just a concept. And so what the anti-immigrants did is they created the concept of illegal. And in the 90s, as you may remember, those of you especially who grew up in California, but the imagery was of mostly Mexican men running towards a fence, because remember, we didn't have a border yet, and hopping the fence, or you would see images of families inside the trunks of cars, and the language was, these murderers, these rapists, they're coming, they're invading, they're taking our jobs. On the one hand, they said we're taking their jobs, and then they said we were lazy. So again, their narrative didn't quite add up, but it was very successful. And this was 94, okay? By 2010, which was what, 16 years later, you had Arizona SB 1070, you had the law in Georgia which banned undocumented students, you had, the anti-migrants were very sophisticated in taking over state by state, and they went after all civic services. They went after driver's licenses, they went after the services that hospitals provide, and schools. So they were strategic in terms of really getting into the state houses and creating legislation based on bias. And so going back to this narrative, right, this idea of who's illegal. Well, first, you know, our Constitution says that no one is guilty of a crime until they have their day in court. So you can't really call anyone illegal, because a person, by virtue of even crossing a border, is not illegal, right? There is no illegal action done. On top of that, you know, we have to consider the way that the word illegal is also a criminalization that's implied. And when you already call someone a criminal, it's very hard to then advocate for their human rights. Okay? So the other thing I think that people don't know is that when was the last time that we had immigration reform in this country? When was the last time that there was actually a bill passed? 1986. 86. Well, IRCA was in 86, right? Okay, right. Okay, let's do 86 for a second. So in 86, Reagan, right, an awful president. I mean, Reagan was just a public health. He was dangerous to our country's public health and to just the war on drugs, his denial of AIDS, just refusal to just invest in our communities. It's criminal. But he was also the last president to legalize about 2 million people, right? And now, just let's look at the numbers. We're now at 11.5 million undocumented people. So the last time we had major reform was in 1986. And people forget that, you know, people say, well, can't they just get to the back of the line? Can't they just get their visas? The system is broken. There is no back of the line. In fact, the line is 18 to 25 years long. So there is no way. There are very, very limited pathways to citizenship, even to begin the process. So first, let's get that cleared up. Second is that at this point now, the anti-immigrant, the culture of wanting to punish migrants is so embedded in our national consciousness that even former President Obama was deporting 1,100 people a day. Okay, so we are confronting a system of criminalization that parallels the same system that locked away so many black and brown people, the war on drugs. Because the prison system has realized that migrants are a cash crop. I mean, migrants are the fastest growing prison industry. And so when you heard, for example, the former president, talk about how the country was no longer going to do contracts with private prisons. Well, that didn't include migrant prisons, which are also rapidly increasing. So we're dealing with a system of systemic abuse that we've seen before, a system of criminalization that is now targeted at very vulnerable people. Because while that's happening domestically, internationally, there is more migrants today than we've ever seen before. I mean, people on the move exceeds what we've ever witnessed before. And so, as a cultural worker, as an artist, I think often when people think of politics, they think of laws, or they think things about the election of a particular president, or they think of a law in California that, for example, would decriminalize, right? We think of these moments in political history. What we don't recognize is that cultural change precedes political change. In order to have these laws, you need the culture to shift first, right? Why did we shift to a pro-prison culture? Well, it was because, Reagan created this thing called the war on drugs. Again, a concept. It's a cultural concept. Then you had these commercials, you had these scary news reports at night that would invoke fear. And so we're dealing with a cultural idea that is being manifested into laws. And so from where I stand as an artist, we have to change the culture. And the way we change the culture is we really challenge implicit bias, right? Because implicit bias is that even though, many people in this country know immigrants, deep down in their psyche, they still have a bias. They still have this but they're criminals, they don't deserve to be here, they're taking things away from me, right? Even though many of these same people who vote for these laws forget that they are themselves children of immigrants. So that's how disconnected and illogical this is. Also, as a cultural worker, I really look at the way that we fight social justice battles. And I think that currently in our social justice space, we are heavily focused on action, right? And this weekend is such a great example of that, which we need to get out into the streets, we need to march, we need to do civil disobedience. However, where we are lacking and where we're not moving fast enough is in the domain of ideas. The right wing is winning, is kicking our butt in the domain of ideas. And the election results really kind of prove that, which is that Trump offered a very compelling story, right, to these disenfranchised white people, and he said, I'm your hero, we can change this country. And even though his views, of course, were very extremist and racist, he told a very compelling story versus Hillary, whose actually story was very, just bland and was not compelling at all. People respond to their heart space. People respond with their emotions more than they do with rationale. And so what I think is that we need to work in the idea space, right? And what does that mean? Well, do we have undocumented characters on TV? No. I mean, we can barely get Latino characters on TV, right? The culture that surrounds us is it is such a solidification of the white power structure. And you just can realize that by going to the movie theater and counting how many white actors there are in these films. Why don't we see black people in these complex roles, like exploring outer space, or, maybe fighting off dragons, or, I'm saying, or falling in love with computers. We only see the ultimate view of who is human is depicted by white men, mostly, secondly by white women. So our concept of humanity is very skewed, because when we do watch films that have characters of color, they're often based in old tropes. They're repeating this kind of stereotypical Viola Davis said it really well, which is that the problem, if you look at the whole structure, from who's managing and who owns these film companies to who writes the storylines. I mean, if they're not writing storylines for people of color, then we are consistently being blocked out. And the thing is that if you look at culture overall, and I'm talking about music, film, right, the things that surround us, because culture shapes our ideas. If we don't have empowering images of ourselves, because a lot of these folks in the Midwest or in the South, or even here in the Central Valley, who vote for these hateful policies, the truth is they have no idea what it's like to be undocumented. They are responding to a biased narrative. So we need to replace that narrative with complex narratives. It's not just about positive narratives, right? Because I don't think we just need to show the dreamer narrative or the college-bound kid. We need to show human narratives, and that is, humans are complex people, right? When we go to the movies, we're not just trying to hear a positive story. We want a complicated, emotional, real story. And so culture is something that we need to engage in and we need to think about. And the way that plays out, is systemically, is also thinking about, even in your own, in your hospitals, what images are shown, right? What kinds of narratives are being shown by the visual landscape, by the music that's heard, by the food that's served. Food is a huge cultural, it's a huge venue for how people express themselves culturally, even what languages exist, right? What reflections do people see of themselves when they're being served? And a way to this is a chart that Van Jones created, but just that, there's the inside and there's the outside game, right? The inside game mean the people we vote for are elected officials, and then outside is the movement, right? The pressure. We apply pressure to the inside game. And then there's also other kinds of pressure that comes, right, from the elites, which is money. And you also have the head space, right? The academia space, the place, the scientists. And we're seeing this tension right now where scientists are like, yo, we're going to apply pressure because you all are clearly climate deniers. So we're going to have to go rogue and really show you what kind of power we have. There's a whole nother dimension, which is the heart space. And I think that caretakers especially work in the space of the heart, which is that how do we move people with their emotions and really get them grounded in the same values that we have? Because the right has been very good at straight up taking over the values. I mean, they have this whole value of families, right? Family values. Does family values apply when we're talking about how mass incarceration is ripping families apart, or how deportation is ripping families apart? Like, we can co-opt those things too. We just have not done so successfully. So let's talk about for a second what most people think when we think about detention centers or when we think about immigrant detention. Well, first, the word detention is really off because these are not detention centers, these are prisons. These are privately run prisons that migrants are being put into, especially in the Rio Grande Valley. And now it's not just migrants, it's refugees, it's asylum seekers. Like, there is an overall criminalization of people who are moving into the borders of this country. So when you Google it, this is what you see, right? Overcrowded. Now, who has put out these images? Largely Breitbart has actually put out these images. This is why I'm saying these folks are really sharp, because when you Google this stuff, this is what comes up. I mean, there is no pictures here of families. There's nothing positive about this. And yes, this does happen, but this is like fear-based narrative. So the truth is that a lot of people who are being detained are mothers and children. Right, moms and kids are being detained in these hospitals, in these detention centers, which is very inhumane. However, let's look for a second at a campaign that has actually been very successful at challenging the narrative of illegality, and this is the undocumented, unafraid movement. So in 2010. Well, first, let's take it back to 2006. Do any of you remember the massive immigrant mobilizations that happened in 2006? Yeah, okay. So there was a huge backlash to that, right? And let's think about what were the kind of symbols. Well, the symbols is that people were wearing white T-shirts, and then they were waving their little American flags and saying, we're immigrants too, we're workers. And although there was a lot of people moving, there was a big right-wing backlash to that, and frankly, we don't have to talk about our humanity by how hard we work, right? I think that's actually a very poor framing, because whether or not migrants are working their asses off does not equal whether or not they get treated well. So then you had some young people who were like, you know what, all you Washington, D.C. organizers, you all just are being way too nice. We need to come out about our status, and we need to say we give zero fucks, and we are going to come out. And we are going to show you who you're talking about when you say undocumented, these illegals or these criminals, all these awful words they use. And they came out and they were so brilliant because they used, they would dress up in their caps and gowns. And they would go do sit-ins in the offices of senators. And really, it was a very performative, artistic expression. And the quote they used was undocumented, unafraid. And so this coming out strategy, 2010, it began to blow up. People were coming out on video. They were coming out in rallies. It became a huge movement. By 2012, the president passed DACA. So in 2 years, you saw an immediate shift. And of course, DACA being the ability for childhood arrivals to have temporary relief. So it's not legalization. It is temporary relief from deportations plus a work permit, which a work permit then allows you to have health insurance. So we have to also see how these things are tied up to people's health. So then, around that time, I created the concept of migration is beautiful. And the reason I wanted to really bring it back to positive and nature-based narratives was because in reality, we've been migrating for the human race has been migrating for all of time. I mean, humans have not even been here on this globe, this planet that long. Animals have been migrating for a very long time. I mean, let's think about pollinators here, monarchs, the monarch butterflies, the bees, like it is in nature. Like the natural world does not have borders, right? People have moved, people have been nomadic. That is just a part of the human experience. And so for me as an artist, I think it's important to lead with these very big imaginary ideas. Now, will we ever be in a civilization without borders? Perhaps not, but as you can see, it's about the idea. Who knows if this wall is actually going to get built, but the idea sure is good, and it's compelling people to the right. So how do we create ideas that actually even at least can move people a little bit away from the right, maybe towards the center, maybe eventually towards the left, but right now the extreme ideas are winning. So I go around the country and I do workshops on Migration is Beautiful. Today we'll be doing a butterfly workshop as well. But around this symbolism, right, which is migration is natural. And what would it be like if Americans would, when they think of migrants, they think of butterflies, right? That's such a much better symbol than, thinking of this concept of invasion or they're taking something away. But instead of thinking butterflies, well, butterflies are pollinators. Butterflies, they're bringing in their experience, they're pollinating, and then they continue on their journey, right? That's a much better and powerful framing. And I work with artists as well to think about how do we put these ideas out, because as artists, our way of inspiring people is through their hearts. And so a few years ago I worked with folks like Pearl Jam and Russell Simmons and The Roots to put out this idea of the butterfly and saying that, without migrants we really wouldn't have the arts. I mean, the arts are like really influenced by ideas from people from all over the world, just like science. And so thinking about how we could even look at our sectors, look at our fields, and really be able to articulate how we got here with the contributions of people of color, of migrants, I think is about making something visible, right? Because art is about making something visible, how you see, shifting the frame. And for so long, the frame has been stuck in whiteness, and we need to change that. And that means telling stories, it means visibility. It actually means three things: visibility and representation. This is why, yes, we need people of color in positions of power, even for visibility's sake, because putting our issues in a visible place means that we are not invisible, because being invisible is worse. Visibility. Second, power. We can't just have visibility, we also need power. We need the ability to make decisions. And what that means is going to the highest ranks of how these decisions are made. And I mean, the regents for the arts, it means who are these jurors who are giving away this prize money? Who's making decisions on who gives Grammys, who gives Oscars? Well, clearly there's a problem here, because they have not recognized the labor or the intellectual property of artists of color, especially black artists. So something's off. They need to give up their power. You know, people do not give up their power easily. You have to fight for that. Representation, power, and access. Access, what that means is, well, there could be a few of us who are, you know, artists, a few people might have made it to doctors, a few people probably graduated from their undergrad, but we need to expand that door. That door needs to get bigger, and the pathways to access need to improve. And that means, again, putting people who really understand our demographics. And so these three things, when I think of culture, it applies to anything, though it applies to any sector, is how you can organize to really make sure that your stories are heard. I'm going to move now into talking about some other projects that I've helped do. One of them is that, so in detention centers, I work with detention centers a lot in the border states, California, Arizona, Texas. They really make it hard to connect with people on the inside. So through a letter writing process, I helped organize a group of artists with my organization Culture Strike, and another artist, Julio Salgado, an amazing undocumented artist. But we helped get some art that was about the experiences of people on the inside. So this takes me to my next point, which is the power of first-person stories. I think that when it comes to creating narratives, we need to have people who experience those narratives, who experience the impact, be the ones telling their story, and being able to amplify that outwards. So that what that means in very practical terms is that if you all know undocumented students, how do we get their experiences out there so that, again, when people talk about their experience, they begin to humanize. Right? This is a classic organizing strategy. Harvey Milk mastered this, which he said, when people come out, then you remove the invisibility layer and people begin to see you as a full human being. It takes time, but it's a process. And now bringing this into, really how does this affect public health? Well, I am somebody who's had an abortion. I'm out about having an abortion, but I was in the closet for 10 years. Okay, and I had an abortion when I was 21, and I came out 10 years later, and I came out in 2012 because the anti-abortion movement was creating legislation at the rate of 500 bills a year. Okay, like they were really organizing a new wave, which we are still in, right? You know how many pro-choice pieces of legislation got proposed in the same time period, around 2011, 2012? About two or three pieces of legislation to protect choice, while the anti-abortion organizers were putting in over 500. By 2012, there was 1,000 pieces of legislation being proposed at the local and state level. So that really moved me, because I said, okay, well, there's a lot of people who've had an abortion who are in the closet about their abortion. So I came out and I learned that 1 in 3 women in this country have an abortion before they are 40. 1 in 3. That's 1/3. Now, this means that there is a lot of people who've had an abortion all around us. But think about how powerful stigma and shame is that people are still in the closet. Now, has that impacted policy? Hells yes. I mean, look at what's happening now. It is the fact that we don't tell our stories is actually negatively impacting us, and other people are telling it for us. So the storytelling aspect actually does influence health policy in a major way. Because then when people are not standing up, a lot of these sisters, wives, partners of these Republicans have probably had abortions, and they're just not coming out, right? And so how do we also frame our stories as a political strategy and really emphasize that we're giving up our political power? So after I came out, I became kind of like a spokesperson for Latinas who had had abortion, and what it made me realize was like, wow, there's a lot of Latinas who are not out. And so I got asked to go all around the country to share my story. Now, what bothered me, and this is also, I think, a failure sometimes for our movements to think big picture. We just are always about this little piece of policy that we want. But when I would go to, the Planned Parenthood's meetings, or I would go speak out, people really wanted to hear about my abortion story. It's almost like people really want to hear this story of hardship. Well, the bigger problem is that as a young person, and as someone growing up in a Latino immigrant family, and going to school, in a Catholic school, I did not get the sexual education tools that I needed in order to be a young person with agency and with good decision making. So even though I was getting a full ride to UC Berkeley, a 4.2 student, AP classes, when it came to my own decisions around my health, didn't have any tools. And this is not just unique to me. I mean, this is actually an epidemic around among young people, especially young women of color. And so what I wanted to explain to the movement is like, look, we talk about abortion, we talk about birth control, but we do not talk about sex. It's like sex is like a very quiet thing. The conservatives have a very clear agenda on sex. I mean, they enforce their agenda. They will punish you if you get caught doing, some sexy stuff in the bathroom or something. You're going down. They will take you, no, I'm serious, they take you down, they will shame you. They are very organized when it comes around their agenda around sex, as you know. So what is the progressive agenda about sex? We don't even talk about sex. We even sometimes in the marriage equity campaign, it was framed around love. It wasn't framed around sex. And I think this is a big problem. And when I think about storytelling, frankly, we need to bring light to sex and the complexity of sex, the joys of sex, and talk about positive narratives. Because if we're only leading with negative narratives, like don't get pregnant, close your legs, don't get an STD, that's very disempowering. And we will continue this cycle where young people, especially young women of color, continue to have very high teenage pregnancy rates. And then you have situations like myself, which although, really great education, very successful person, but did not have the tools to be able to talk about sex. So again, the power of storytelling and coming out, telling authentic stories. I also really think about symbolism, right? And I think about how, as an artist, that we use a lot of symbols that are kind of tired and actually work against what we really want. So for example, when we talk about mass incarceration and the prison industry, often the images we see are people behind bars, right? You see just some hands and you see this dark cell. There is almost like a subconscious wall between people who are on the outside and people who are on the inside. Well, there is millions of our family members on the inside. What can we do to dissolve this wall? Not just that, because we are now moving in places like California where decriminalization, a lot of our people are getting out of jail, are getting out of prison. Right? So how do we reintegrate them? In this piece, what I wanted to do is dissolve the bars and instead think about moving beyond the idea of bars and border. What's beyond that? What's the opposite of bars? Freedom, second chances, reconciliation, right? And as cultural workers, I think it's very important to not just regurgitate the no, but also embrace the yes, right? What do we want? We want freedom. We want our loved ones to have a second chance. We want them to be reintegrated into society. We want them to have opportunity. We want them to belong. And so that's something I continuously look at my art. That's why my art, before I used to do, a lot of posters like no war, no this, no that, and then I just felt like, this is not adding to the larger, lexicon of conversation and of ideas. And ideas is the place where we can win. So it's so, it's like politics is moving so fast that I even had to update my presentation right as I came in. I just did this over the weekend. And again, I was thinking about, because a lot of the, over the weekend, as you're aware, as you may be aware, the ban on Muslim people, and also I want to just mention that they have taken the anti-immigrant kind of push out, get out idea to a whole nother level. This is the danger in letting these very devastating ideas thrive. The danger is that they will begin to impact other policy. I can guarantee you, in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to be talking about climate refugees. They are going to use the same policies they use for Latin American migrants and Muslims to keep people out. And it's really messed up because, you know what, the United States and China, we're the ones who created this problem. We use 17 times more energy. We are creating the climate crisis. And we're closing our doors, like when people are climate refugees, right? Like where's the responsibility in that? And not just that, I mean, you all know that one of this, I don't even like to use his name, just the new word that's circulating in the movement is 45. 45 is really attacking us in all ways. In fact, the strategy is around producing chaos so that we are so busy trying to fight on multiple fronts that we lose track of the bigger idea. But let's also realize that we are witnessing culture move very fast. So as you all probably heard, this is the first time we're witnessing mass amounts of people put pressure on corporations in minutes. I mean, you saw that, the Delete Uber campaign. This is the power also of culture, is that social media is a way to organize people around a cultural concept, right? And so we also have power. It's just around being creative and how to exercise that. And so I did this piece, Let Them In, because I was thinking about, well, yes, no ban, no wall. I can get with that, right? That's a beautiful statement. But then what's the yes? What do we want? Well, we want to let them in. We want to welcome them, right? We want to say, fuck your walls. We're going to tear your wall down. Your wall is obsolete. And it's old, and it needs to go. I think we can, this is a piece that I did not do, I wanted to show it to you, Sanctuary for All, is really also thinking about how do we lead with our demands. If I were to make this poster, I would actually have put Sanctuary for All as the lead, as how we lead, because then we are leading with our demands and our values, and we are diminishing we are not just being reactionary. Reactionary is when they say, we'll build a wall, and we say, no, don't build a wall. You're reacting. And the 45 is really good at creating a reactive culture, because when people are reacting, they're chaotic, they're kind of weak, they're tired, they're in a fighting stance, and you just move right around them. We bulldoze. So, thinking about how do we lead with our values, because then we're advancing our narrative just as we're fighting back against this, all this other stuff, which of course we need to fight back, but we also need to keep our track, our lane moving well. I think California is actually going to do some amazing things. I feel like also we are going to be in a big conversation. California, of course, who did all this, we were anti-migrant for years. We locked up people more than any other state. We used to be number one. Not number one anymore. Now we're clearly decriminalizing. But we've learned, and now we have some of the most innovative policy. And I believe that we can really influence the rest of the country and really show them how it's done. And in a way, this is creating a moral crisis. The other thing I think that when it comes to storytelling and culture is really bringing it back to morals, right? Really bringing it back, the right thing to do around climate change. It's a moral question. The right thing to do around immigrants is also a question of morality. Equality is a question also of morality. So we could also flip that and really elevate our values. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being such an attentive audience. We can go ahead and open it up for questions. Thank you. Questions, comments, reactions?
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for speaking the truth. I often hear a lot about, this is going to be so bad now, and it is. But thank you for pulling out what's happened and what happened during the Obama administration in regards to immigrants. The administration deported most immigrants in the history of the United States. So I appreciate your candor. It's hard to say those things, but those things need to be said because we also have a lot of reparations to do within what we think are our allies.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I really appreciated how, and just got the deep sense of how art can be really used to transform culture, and then culture change being the driver for policy and political change. One of the things that I've been struggling with is this idea of how, as we are, let me use Facebook for example. I feel like our communities that are hoping to drive change the conversations are getting siloed within interfaces like Facebook.
Totally true.
And oftentimes the challenge is, are we talking within ourselves when we all agree, or are we talking to the individuals who are on the fence, are ambiguous,
Right.
don't know how to feel, or who are on the complete other extreme? And oftentimes those are the more difficult conversations to engage. How do you perceive art being utilized as a vehicle that can extend outside of the silo that we tend to?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, very similar to many of the fields you're in, that we are in fields that belong to the people. I mean, in reality, art and culture is a public, the public has a right to it, right? And it also, it kind of, whether or not you want it, it's always around you. It's in the visuals that you see, it's in the music that you hear, where you choose to eat. So I think that you're right. I mean, Facebook is definitely, and Facebook is actually even having conversations internally around how they're creating these echo chambers. Now, I think that, you know, when they say you're speaking to the choir, well, the choir needs to continue singing. So it's fine to speak to the choir. The choir needs to be reactivated, but we also need to expand to other places. And I think that as artists, we have very wide audience spaces. I mean, even when I go, you know, when I show in galleries or I show in museums or I travel to campuses, I have such a wide mix. And so I try to find many opportunities to really impact people, even if it's in a small interaction or in a larger interaction. And I think many of you will also have that opportunity. I mean, one, you are, you know, in the fields of health and of caretaking, and this is something you are interacting with human beings who are, regardless of where they're from or their status, are being in their bodies. I mean, you have the widest, not widest, but widest audience base, and that is a huge place of power. I mean, just like in schools, really wide audience base that allows for this, for these ideas to really take form and evolve. So I think, you know, thinking about how do we make, how do we push pressure so that the spaces which you know are usually considered neutral, you know, the arts is considered neutral, which is just such a lie, because there's nothing neutral about the arts. There's actually nothing neutral about anything. Everything has a point of view, and you see it around, you know, you just can walk around and see it. So I think it's important to play on both fronts, both continue to inspire the choir and then bring new people into the choir. And the way you bring new people in, you know, my friend Alicia Garza, who co-founded Black Lives Matter, you know, she talks about how we're not going to bring people in by saying, oh, hey, white women, where were you in the Black Lives Matter protests? Or where were you when this happened? That's not how you're going to bring people in. People, right, you bring people in by really saying, okay, you're imperfect, and let's talk about this. Let's try to figure out how to bring you into this larger. Now you can finally see how it's been, kind of how it's been for me. I think that a lot of white people are having a hard time right now because it's the first time where they see a blatant, there is just no representation of them. Well, you know, progressive white folks, there's no representation of them in the power structure, and they're like, fuck, I'm not like included. I don't, you know, that's not me. That's hella not me. Well, we've been knowing that for a long time. I mean, I never see any brown people in there. I'm just like, I already know what it feels like to be completely disenfranchised and know that no one is there to speak for your interests. But I think for a lot of white people, this is a very new experience, and it's kind of shocking, and we have to remind them this is actually a product of white supremacy, and so we need you to go work on your people, and we need to work on white people too. I mean, if you don't want to, you don't, it's not your job, but it's gonna really help us build our movement to really, that's how we're gonna do it. If we want to win, we got to be in a winning game. So yes, I hope that answers your question. Yes, thank you.
I really, really appreciate how your art connects so many different movements and so many different artistic styles. And I'm wondering, there's also this tension that I've seen a lot in the artistic community around cultural appropriation.
Oh, absolutely.
And kind of siloing as well. And I'm curious how you balance that in a respectful way as an artist.
Yeah.
Bridge movements.
Yeah, so one is that on the one hand, as an artist, I also try to stay a bit independent because I think sometimes, I'm not an organizer, so I'm not necessarily just wanting to repeat a political idea. I think sometimes even our movements are kind of stuck in an idea. They need to think bigger. So I try to always think with my artistic tools, and I also try to really create space for people who are inspiring me, or whose work I'm able to do this thanks to undocumented folks who really shared their stories with me, and so I try to then create opportunity for undocumented people and work with undocumented artists as a way to create, keep the capital moving. And I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about even relationship capital. I have social capital, creative capital, which means that my creativity is also a form of capital, and how do we expand that? So I really try to think about how to share that and be equitable with it. Any final questions? Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah, and then we have one.
Has a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I hope, but I just really appreciate your advocacy for destigmatizing abortion. I think
Thank you.
it's, I have close family, acquaintances and friends, and they just tell me it's kind of like a secret army in this country. And I just wanted, how else can we destigmatize as healthcare professionals? Through social media, sharing the stories, can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. I mean, I get my care at Kaiser, and when I walk into Kaiser, I see flyers about domestic abuse and reporting domestic abuse, right? I see things like that. I don't see things around, it's just it's a pain frame. It's a negative framing as take action or speak out if you're experiencing this negative thing. Where is their joy-based framing, or even pleasure-based framing, or even just framing that's not negative? So I think that's what I would have liked to see, even as a young, like a teen going into, I used to go to teen clinic at La Clinica in Oakland. Where are the narratives around, hey, you want to learn how to have great relationships? You want to take a class on masturbation? You want to really get the truth? Come to these workshops, or even, what I mean? Just really speaking to people based on the things they want to do that brings them joy, I think is an overall, actually, Janice Miracatoni wrote this poem, and she said hospitals are where people die in. I think people of color have very different experiences in hospitals. So I think in order to challenge that, then really thinking about the environment. How do you create an environment that is visually inclusive, but that also invites other things that are not just negative experiences? You see what I mean? So I think that would be great. And also, interestingly, I'm working now with a lot of abortion clinics to do art in their waiting rooms, so that, because when people are recovering, after you have an abortion, usually sleeping for a little bit, you're in the recovery room, and you start opening your eyes, and you want to see positive stuff, because you don't want to walk outside and see the protester person, and that's your memory, right? How can your memory be, no shame, no stigma, power to you, this decision is yours? That, I think, this is what I mean by the built environment. How do we create things like that, right? Yes. Cool. Why don't we do one last question, and then I'll be at my table. I have a bunch of art for sale. I got T-shirts and just a bunch of things in case people want to take anything.
Do you have any suggestions for how advocates and service providers
who are like really working with the nitty-gritty every day can access creativity?
Yes. Okay. So this is a great question. So the other thing I work, because I consult with a lot of different sectors, you know, like the climate change sector, economic justice, reproductive justice, which I don't even think should be called reproductive justice, by the way. I hate that. I don't want to reproduce. It should be called sexual justice. You know. Anyway, one thing I tell them is that artists are iterative people. Artists are actually very embracing of failure. And artists they prototype a lot, right? And so they have an idea and they'll be like, oh, let me see how I'll make that. That doesn't work. Let me try this. Or, that's ugly. Scrap it. Let's do it again. It's really a bias towards action, right? And in your work, I think that sometimes in some sectors, there's a very emphasis on intellectual practice and not embodied practice. And what the arts has taught me is that embodied practice is really critical. And what I mean by embodied practice is to, you know, whether it's dance or movement or even art making, is that the concept of repeating things and prototyping, right? So for example, you may have an idea around how to get more people to sign up for your, I don't know, for your flu shot clinic or something like that, or your, you know, your free clinic in the community. Well, the normal thing is that people would just talk about it and they would say, oh yeah, we'll have this, let's plan it. But how many people would then go say, yo, let's just do a pop-up. Let's do a pop-up in the lobby and see how it goes. Let's ask people, what's this experience like for you? Can we improve it? Can we do something better? Can we maybe use a different color? Maybe what we're giving you, are you even going to use it? Like, is this like little apple cutter thing for free that we're giving you? Is it even useful? Would you like something else? What kind of food should we serve? How do we make this a warm environment? Are we, you know, this is what I mean by prototype it. Just do it. Try it out and then go back to the drawing board. And I think that that's, you know, that's something that other sectors don't do, is they don't do it until it's time to do it, but you could actually embrace failure and try again, redesign, adapt, try again until you really get your beautiful work of art or your beautiful intervention. And ask people. I mean, the other thing is artists freaking love attention, so we're always like, what do you think of my work? Do you like it? Someone will say, well, you know, you could have done this, and you're like, oh, write that down in my little memory Rolodex. So yes, iteration, bias to action, prototyping, feedback, gathering feedback, and really paying attention to details in terms of how people feel, right? Feelings. Actually valuing feelings and not just, you know, processes, but really asking, you know, how does this make you feel? Can I improve it? Is there anything I can modify to make sure you're more comfortable, more at ease, more joyful, and going from there. Great. Thank you so much, everyone.